And welcome everyone to this webinar. The radiance, the mystery of radiance. It is a mystery, as Elijah just intimated. It's something that's hidden. It's something that's inward. It's the mystery behind these teachings, behind the transmission of the gene keys. What is our radiance? What are we doing here? What are we really doing? What is this wisdom about? We're spending our time contemplating. We're contemplating our navel. We're contemplating this inner point, these cities, these shadows, these gifts. And it's all taking us on this inner journey. And when you come to this point of radiance, this sphere, you're really coming to the nub of the mystery. You're coming to that which lies hidden inside us, and humans have always had a penchant for trying to understand hidden treasure, trying to unlock hidden treasure, that which is hidden. So when we, as Elijah said, we've been looking at the life's work and the evolution, these outward-looking gifts. What are we here to do in life? What gets in the way of that genius through the evolution, and how we unlock this potential breakthrough as we go into those shadows for the first time for some of us, really in depth, with honesty, facing the issues, the discomfort in our body, really facing it, really wrapping it with our awareness, with our self-compassion, and then preparing the ground for a potential breakthrough, and how that breakthrough comes, and when it comes, and what it looks like is completely a mystery. One thing that's sure about it is a cellular happening. It is a cellular breakthrough. It's something that takes place in the cells, the physical cells of our body. So it's something that we know about when it happens. It's not something in our mind. It's something that we feel. Something changes in our body, in our DNA. So this is when the light that is coming from our core can reach across that veil because of our courage, our valor, because we've been willing to look at what is, simply that which is, like the Buddha's teaching, simply being here now, simply being with what is, being with the suffering, just being with it, being in it. That is enough to unlock this radiance, this inner light, this illumination. So I'd like to talk a little about illumination and inner light. What is inner light? There's a whole spectrum that lies hidden within the inner realms concerning inner light. And there's a wonderful quote from one of my mentors on the higher planes, I guess, Bayan Saduno. The degree of development of all beings depends upon the quality and quantity of light which they possess. The manifestations of intelligent life are always distinguished by the presence of light, and the degree of intelligence is judged by the degree of light. So the more the light emanating from an intelligent being is radiant, intense, soft, and delicate, the more mightily it illumines and gives meaning to life, and the higher is the intelligence which it brings. So the degree of our intelligence is dependent on this inner light, and it's not something we can measure. We can't really measure it. We can only feel it, we can sense it, we can see it, we can hear it as truth spoken, coming from another person's heart. We can see it in the emanations around a being when they're expressing the love from the core of their being. And we often experience it as having this soft and delicate but very subtle kind of aroma as it wafts around that person. And we have a sense that that person is tapped into something higher, because you can smell it. You know, you can smell it around a person. You can smell it in their words, in their gestures, and you can feel it. And it's an emanation, you know, emanations. Emanations is a fascinating word. You know, life, everywhere we look around us, everything, every object, every person, every leaf, every blade of grass, it all is an emanation of light that has followed itself and become something. But if you trace these emanations back to their source, you get to the source of the mystery. And the source of the mystery is how the whole Maya, the whole illusion and web of the cosmos is constructed. It's constructed out of these emanations that have begun from a single point and just followed their arcs through space, and the evolutionary currents have worked inside them to create something and are still creating. You know, so every object is unfinished. Every human is unfinished. We're all unfinished. We're all growing and evolving. We're emanating. So when we turn within and we follow the light back to its source, that's a very powerful thing to do. That's what contemplation is inviting us to do. Turn within and follow the emanations back to the source. So when you look at your gene keys, that's what we're doing. We're following these emanations back to their source, through the shadow, unlocking the gift, and right back to the siddhi, to the very pinpoint of where, of the essence, the quintessence of what that emanation really is. And the more we turn in, the greater our radiance becomes. That's a paradox. You know, the more you turn inwards, the more the light blooms outwards. And turning in means going into the source of our suffering, going into the source of the discomfort that we feel. And as its true nature is progressively revealed, we see that it's actually grace. It's actually, there's something wonderful. As I keep saying, every shadow contains a gift. And as we continue following these emanations that life brings us, then the light continues to grow and it continues to clear. So radiance is something that is always growing. It is growing. The other thing about radiance is it's not just about light, it's also about fire. Fire. And fire gives warmth and solace to others. You know, fire creates explosions, breakthroughs, healing, synthesizes. It brings things together. It brings humans together. For millennia we've gathered around fires because we sense, we feel that the fire is, you know, the fire is inside us. And so we gather around it. It brings us together. It kind of calms us as well as exciting us. So radiance has that quality of fire inside it as well. It's the solar fire. And that brings us to the sun. You can't really talk about radiance without looking at the sun. You know, the sun is the ultimate outward symbol of what radiance is. And the sun, what it does is it gives, regardless of whether it's who or how it's being received. You know, you can be in a cave underground and there's a tiny chink of light and the sun's out and you get that tiny chink of light and the sun doesn't know you're in there. It doesn't care. It's just radiating that light. And that's all it does, without question. So when we talk of radiance, that we're talking of that aspect of our humanity, of our divinity, that is our very, very highest potential. You know, to give unconditionally, to give love unconditionally, and to create that force that gathers people, that brings warmth to each other's hearts. You know, the sun is like if you look at the sun and you consider the stars, which are also suns, they're focal points of divinity, of higher consciousness. Each one has a different quality and a different kind of inner light. So when you look at your radiance, it's a very different kind to the person next to you. And there's a subtlety to that. There's a specific aroma to each person's radiance, which is a wonderful thing to contemplate, particularly when you contemplate the Siddhi. And you really go into that. And you've got to get through the word and into the field of that gene key so that it begins to open up and you get a sense of what that really feels like. You at your zenith, living at your zenith. So radiance is life-giving. Radiance is also has a lot to do with health. It would do. Being light and being about warmth and fire. It's about the health of an organism, the energy flow through an organism or a being, whether that's the individual being, you or I, or whether it's the collective, all of us together. We all have radiance, and that radiance is really unlocked through what we call the aura. The aura. I'm going to read you the glossary quote about the aura, because I think it's good. The aura, the auric field, the true multi-dimensional body of all human beings. The aura is a broad spectrum electromagnetic field emanating from and grounded by your physical body. Your aura acts like a prism that refracts various different wave bands of light. It is the electromagnetic expression of your chemical state at any given moment. This also means that you can change your physiological chemistry by means of your aura. Through meditating or concentrating on your aura, you can refine its frequency and impact your physical, emotional, and mental well-being for the better. As the overall frequency of your aura rises, its magnetic power also expands, and you even begin to transform your environment and those around you. Your aura always relays the absolute truth of your inner state, registering your every thought, feeling, urge, and hidden pattern as a subtle emanation. By working with the 64 gene keys, you're effectively purifying the many dense layers of your aura, making you more radiant, more sensitive, and more compassionate towards all beings. There's a lot in that. There's a lot in that. Things that jump out to me is that you can change your physiological chemistry by means of your aura. You can refine your frequency, and also that it's the electromagnetic expression of your chemical state. So in other words, the way you physically are is dependent on the energetic structure that holds you up. And that's something really incredible. So as that quote by Bain Sadhguru said, your level of evolution depends on your radiance, depends on the amount of light that your physical body is emanating. And that depends on the amount of inner work you have put in to your life, because that's how you release that inner light, that radiance. And therefore you increase the size and the frequency of your aura. And the aura does an incredible job, because if you think about when you meet someone for the first time, if you were to meet someone for the first time and neither of you speak, but you just sit together for 5 minutes or 10 minutes in a room, just in each other's aura, maybe you don't even look at each other, so you're not distracted by the senses, then those auras are communicating and talking on levels that are extraordinary. Really, and when we become more and more sensitive, we're going to communicate more and more in this way through the aura, because there are layers of information that are exchanged in that way. So our health is dependent on the amount of light from our radiance. And our true health, therefore it lies hidden. Things like the food we take in, the nutrition, it's important, but it's not as important as how we take it in. Like for instance, when we bless our food, when we eat our food consciously, it then has this added dimension as it becomes nutrition not just for the body but for the soul, for the light body, for the aura as well. It becomes what the Indians call prasad. And there's a prasad is a food that has been blessed, and it has an extra dimension. There's a wonderful story from Maharaji. This is one of my favorite teachers at the moment, because someone gave me a book of his stories about him, and wonderful stories. And he's a kind of mad Hanuman type master. That means he's kind of monkey-like and difficult to pin down his behavior. Anyway, one of his ways of offering darshan, or offering shakti to his disciples and devotees, is through food, through prasad, through food that he blesses. And so people would come to his ashram, and he would just give them loads and loads of food, all the time food, and lots of sweet food and kind of fried food, and food that wasn't really we know isn't particularly good for you, but because it was blessed by this great master, people would eat it. And there's a wonderful story about the Buddhists coming down from the hills, the Western Buddhists kind of doing their retreats in the mountains, and they come down from the hills to Allahabad, where his ashram was, because they wanted to kind of experience, his energy. And they come into this crazy ashram where people were just kind of eating all this food that was really bad for them, and they'd had very strict vegetarian minimalist diet, because they'd been on this Buddhist retreats for several months, and they'd look around and go, oh my God, what are these people doing? This is not spiritual in the least bit. They were stuffing their faces with sweets, but this, within about a week, most of those people would find that they suddenly start eating, and one of them, I remember in one of the stories, he was saying, it's like I had never eaten before. I couldn't get enough of this food. It was like soul food. It was feeding a hunger that was so deep. I just stuffed it in. So, food it has other dimensions, and there are many types of food. Food, light is the ultimate food. So one of the things that I've been increasingly doing, is watching the sunrise and drawing in the energy of the sunrise. That is the purest food you can get from the sun, is the sunrise. It's at its purest at sunrise. I'll put out some videos on that over the next weeks and months. And so nutrition for the soul. As the light hits the coding in our DNA, it catalyzes higher and higher manifestations, and it's like this inner consciousness that breaks through the Maya and therefore realizes the illusory nature of this world that we're living in. And then you can see reality as it is, pure, and like our radiance, it contains extraordinary capacities, where people don't talk about this much, but the potential within the physical body for physical immortality. I know it's kind of one of those things that it's like he's talking about physical immortality. It's like he's mentioned crop circles or something, or aliens. It's one of those taboo subjects. And yet I know from my inner journeys that there are keys and codes inside the physical body that unlock pathways that allow the body to feed on itself, to feed on the light around itself. Just as a star does. The star feeds off the vacuum of space, even though you can't see what the nutrient that it's drawing in. That's how it is able to endlessly give of itself, because it's drawing in from the vacuum of space. And inside us, we have that capacity to do the same through our radiance. So these are all things to consider when you're contemplating your radiance. And in that sense, your radiance is magical. It's magical. It can catalyze the miraculous, because it works on so many different levels. It reaches out into space-time. It's unhampered by time and space. It can connect us to our higher evolutions, and they can connect to us through our radiance, through the physical body and the subtle bodies. So it's a bridge. It bridges and connects the divine synapses. We think of sometimes things as, we call them synchronicities, but everything's connected in time and space. So when your radiance grows, to really a wide, broad spectrum. Synchronicity is simply the liquid field that you live in. Everything is timed to perfection. Everything. I've seen this at times, you know, the omniscient potential of everything in life, absolutely timed. Every second is at one level predestined, and there's a perfection, there's a grace to it. And the radiance has the potential to unlock those states so that we can enter into the field of that grace and approach the divine. I mean, it's very, you know, this is the mystery, right? This is really why we're here, to unlock this treasure. You know, there's this wonderful one-liner from one of my favorites. I think I've mentioned it before. My favorite Victorians, Walter Russell, and a polymath, a genius. And his one-liner was, "Light doesn't travel." And that's a good one for physicists to consider. Light doesn't travel. I mean, you know, I instantly I read that, or I heard that, I just felt the truth of it in every cell of my being. It doesn't travel, but it appears to travel because of the way the mind and the brain and our senses measure. And we have to measure distance because we live in this construct, this Maya, through our mind. Everything appears to travel, but actually from the divine, everything's already there. Light is already within everything. So it's not that it travels, it's that awareness just lights up at different places along the way, and it gives us the illusion that light is traveling. I mean, that's a deep one. I'll perhaps explore that further one day. I'll really drop it in there as a contemplative nugget. And brings me to another thing about the radiance, which is the radiance, not only is it magical, but it's musical. You know, we are human beings, we are tones in the cosmos. Light has tonal quality. There are 7 notes that we can see. There are 7 tones, 7 colors, 7 rays, and it points to the musical nature of all form. And as our radiance grows, it also becomes more harmonic. You know, in the beginning, it's pretty dissonant. You know, it's dissonant. It's creating interference. So we're picking up interference. That's the shadow frequency. But in time, as our love grows, as our heart opens, as our creativity grows, our aura sends out a pulse. It sends out a song, a beautiful song. We become more poetic. You know, we become alive. The fire is in us. Our lives move and flow differently. We see things that we never saw before. Our mind opens up to these higher planes to see the connections, the connections between things. A causal plane, you know, where you see the causes between things, two things. You can follow those emanations back to the causes. Our very movements become more graceful, and we become living instruments for the light to dance through, to play upon. You know, our thoughts become inspired, our feelings are elevated, and our gestures become majestic. That's our radiance. So think about the gene key of your radiance and hold it as a very, very special place in your contemplation. You will return to it over and over and over again. And I want to talk also about the shadow of radiance, which sounds a weird paradox. The lack of radiance. You know, the lack of radiance is a kind of grey, drab, monotonous life. You know, frustration, the uphill struggle. You know, the dissonant energy fueling your environment, fueling your aura, you feeding into the chaos. You know, the aura is all about our environment and our connection to the environment. And this is the loop, you know, that we get into sometimes. Those loops. You know, the other day I was driving. I needed a lift from dropped my kids off at school, and I needed a lift into town. And for some reason I had to leave my car there. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, there's always someone to give you a lift. So I got a lift with this guy who was a plumber. Really nice guy. It's those of you who've done the activation sequence, you know I like plumbers, right? And And this is a lovely guy, and I hadn't seen him for a long time. And I said, so how's your life? You know, we got about 7 minutes, I guess, in the car together. So I went straight to it. So how's your life? You know, he said, oh, I said, oh, well, up and down. I said, what, your relationship? Yeah. He said, yeah, good, relationship, good. He said, it's my mind that's the problem. I said, oh, why? He said, I'm just in the spin all the time. You know, I can't stop it. And he used to be a yoga teacher. It's one of the reasons I love him, because he's one of the rare people that went from being a yoga teacher to being a plumber. Usually it's the other way around, right? And actually he's making a lot of money down where I live, because there's so many yoga teachers and very few plumbers. Anyway, so he said that, you know, he was in this loop all the time, and it's because he's worrying and anxious, and the same kind of loop that many of us get into. You know, worrying about money, worrying about what's going, you know, all these things, all the things of life. And so he said, I haven't done any yoga for a while. I just can't get myself to do it, you know. And I said, look, you only need to do it once. Just do it once. And he said, what do you mean? He said, I need to do it every day. I said, yeah, but you're thinking about the 1,000 steps. Just think about the one. Think about the first one. Just do it once in the morning before you kind of have your breakfast. Just do half an hour, and it'll put you right back into that place of calm. It'll reset your day. You only need to do it once. And he'd been worrying, and was why he couldn't do it, because he'd just been worrying, God, I can't do it every day. I can't do it every day. But actually, he only had to do it once to reset that radiance, to begin to change the way in which his aura interacts with his environment. Otherwise, you're just fueling, you know, this time-centric mania that we get caught in. So the contemplation is essential. I also told him about the contemplation of the triple flame, by the way, which he loved, because anyone can do that, right? Every 3 hours, take 3 minutes. It reminds me also of something one of my children said recently to me about bees, that there are bees at the local school where my children go, Waldorf school, and there's these bees. And one year the queen died, and when the queen died, all these bees suddenly went into chaos. There's this chaotic frequency, and they started stinging the chickens in their eyes. The chickens were blind. They started stinging people around the school. It was just this mayhem, and it made me really think about this notion of, if you don't have that core, if you're not able to keep that centeredness, then you are just a victim of the chaotic frequencies, the dissonance, you know, the bees without the queen. And so it's vital, you know, and this is part of the radiance, and you know, you have to cultivate that inner light. And this is what brings to the gift. You know, the gift is about slowing down. You see that the more you slow down, the more you get done. What a mystery, but what a truth. And that's the essence of contemplation, right? You know, and you know, I was talking about this recently. You know, in the Gene Keys community, I encourage meandering and lingering and dwelling, contemplating, digesting, imbibing. You know, all things that take time, that slow down the rhythm to its natural pace, you know, like the art of conversation, right? This is a lost art, to be able to listen and engage, and listen and engage, instead of this manic, okay, I'm done. You know, listen, engage. You know, in Japan it's called the art of harage, to communicate through one's inner radiance. I mean, through the belly, right? Hara. Through one's aura, through one's core. You know, and often in Japan, people will sit and they're conversing, and the conversation will lapse into silence. It's very confusing for Westerners, you know, because you think you've said something offensive, but actually the person is simply listening through the hara, and a silence has occurred, and there's a pause, and there's nothing to be said in that pause, and the aura continues the conversation until words appear again. Beautiful. And all these things are parts of the gift of your radiance, the creative gift, The gift is all about creativity, the fire of creativity, the radiance that creates beauty. That's all radiance is interested in doing, creating beauty, igniting beauty, flooding the environment with beauty. And then you come to the siddhi, and I tell you, this is one to really, really contemplate over and over and over. It's the unique note of your radiance. Mine, for example, is boundlessness. So through me, you get this huge, expansive awareness as I stretch the concepts, as I open up the possibilities of what most people would consider naive. The whole notion of siddhis. Tune into your siddhi and let it pervade you. They're all boundless. And follow its emanation back to the source. Go within and be patient and give it time and nurture and cultivate your radiance. It's a great mystery. Okay. Harage. The lines of the radiance, 6 lines. These are the environment that our radiance needs in order to blossom, in order to grow. And all of the lines are true for all of us. And it's really important to understand that when you're traveling the golden path. If you don't just read your own line, that's just shortchanging yourself. You'll miss the full story. You miss the perspective into which your line sits. Yours is simply an emphasis, but all the lines are for all of us. It's really important, this. So the first line of the radiance is solitude. Also, every single line gives you a clue about every single other line in the journey. So every other first line, if you have one, in your journey through the golden path and beyond, through the gene keys, every first line has an element where it's about solitude. Excuse me. If you don't go in, you can't go out. That's solitude. If you don't go in, you can't find the emanation to release the radiance. This is the problem for many people in the modern world, is that they don't go within. They're so engaged out there that there's no radiance. There's nothing left inside them for others, for themselves, to fuel to the environment. So it's about balance, solitude. Solitude is a beautiful thing. It's an essential component of contemplation. You need to be alone primarily to contemplate. You can contemplate with someone else, but you need the time to take it in, to integrate a concept, an idea, to mill it over. One of the things I do is I walk. Walking is wonderful. Some people dance, some people meditate. Walking I love because it just suits my body type, it suits the environment I live in, and when I walk, I contemplate. And by the time I've come back from my walk, something's happened, always. And solitude is essential, that space, that inner space. And then you see when you come to the second line, that radiance also requires a marriage. The second line is marriage. So these first 2 lines, they go with each other, solitude and marriage. You see, this is where the radiance starts to reach outwards. Solitude creates the centripetal force, and marriage creates the centrifugal. A person, an environment, like a home or a space. These are all things you can be married to. Something that you have a relationship with. So your radiance, what it does, as I said, it wants to create beauty. It wants to create order. It wants to create harmony wherever it goes. So if you have the second line, then it's triggered through a relationship of some form. This is the archetype of the radiant bride, right? The radiant bride finally found a man who's committed to me. The amount of radiance that unlocks, just the idea of it. Of course, that radiance doesn't often last. But that's another story, right? To commit to one thing. This is what the second line is about. To commit all the energy to one thing. To pour all your resources into one thing. Radiance has a purpose. You know, radiance is connected to purpose, right? Through this pathway of core stability that you're going to be looking and contemplating. You know, and the purpose is to unlock stagnant energy, to create magic, that fire of radiance. It wants to unlock things. It wants to awaken things. It wants to open things up. It's not just for show. It has a purpose. You know, this is the transmission. This is the relationship, for example, of a teacher and a student. The transference of the radiance of the transmission. It's a marriage. You know, in the Gene Keys, if you really get hooked, you get married to the transmission. You let it come and live inside you. And that's powerful. You know, if you've had a couple of breakthroughs, you are married. What choice have you got? Because it feels so good, right? Why would you stop? You know, you're following an emanation. You've got to continue the curve. You've got to see where it leads. So you keep following it. Sometimes it leads you into silence and solitude. Sometimes it leads you into connectedness. These first two lines, you see how they're a dance, solitude and marriage. We need them both. So if you have one of the two, just contemplate that one a little more, and you'll see that that's a real need, a key that unlocks something deep in your radiance. It might also be a sticking point for you. The third line, radiance requires interaction. Interaction. You know, interaction, what is interaction? It's aliveness, it's fire, it's warmth, it's celebration, it's contact. It's laughter, it's exercise, it's new places, it's new people, it's travel. Radiance, all radiance, thrives on change, on growth. This is the third line. The radiance around plants, around trees, around anything that's healthy, healthy organisms. The green, you know, the greenness. You know, there was, what was her name? Hildegard von Bingen, great medieval mystic woman. You know, and her thing was the greenness of life. She would just, all her contemplation was on the power of the green. The green is the radiant, you know, life force. The radiance of animals expressed through their movement, their sounds, their presence, their majesty. Radiance requires interaction with all these realms. You know, that's part of its essence, to connect you, to bridge us, to interact with things, with all kinds of things, to change, to embrace change. So third line radiance, embrace change, love change. Be careful of stuckness. And change includes marriage, by the way, and it includes solitude. These lines all encode each other. They include each other. So a marriage, you can easily think that like a marriage between a man and a woman, for example, that's something that gets stuck. It can do. Unless you bring that third line in and you have that celebration and that change and that aliveness and that laughter and that, you know, and those plants and those animals and those children and all this and all the things that actually allow that marriage to grow and thrive. You know, they're part of it. They're part of the umbrage of that marriage. So these lines, really contemplate them. Hopefully bring them alive a little bit for you in their energy. And then you shift to the fourth line. You go to the upper part of the hexagram structure. And it's a bit more transpersonal. Radiance requires friendship. It requires it. It actually does. Radiance requires friendship. It creates connections. It opens networks. It fuels communities. Remember I said radiance was like music? Music connects people. It unites people. It softens us. The more genuine friends you have, the more radiant you feel. And a genuine friend, that's something that's different from an acquaintance. That's love, you know? That's love, both ways. Radiance that thrives within community. That's what the fourth line is all about. And you can see that it resonates with the first line of the solitude. You know, the solitude is an essential component. You need the solitude in order to have the radiance, in order that you can connect with the people. You know, otherwise you don't have anything to give, because it's in your solitude that the radiance grows through your connection to the inner world, the inner light. So the fourth line is powerful because a fourth line radiance has a real powerful influence. It's one-pointed in its influence. So look at that gene key if you have it in a fourth line, and really look at what it's pointing towards. One focused area of presence, really powerful, and really with the requirement of a whole pool, a whole gene pool of friends and allies, and you're in the middle of all those. That's amazing. And then the fifth line is impact. Radiance requires impact, because radiance has a mission, you know. It has a secret mission. Remember, it's a mystery. It's a fire. It's a wildfire. It's a forest fire. And the impact of your aura, of your words, of your presence on others, you don't know the impact. When that love starts coming out, you have no idea. Like me, I have no idea how many people my words impact. Every now and again when I go and do a course or a retreat and I meet people and I hear their stories, I have some idea of the level of impact that my love has in the world. But otherwise, the odd email, you know, I don't know. So the fifth line is all about the impact, but you don't need, it's like the sun, you don't need to see it. You just need to share it. You don't need to see the impact. It's not about getting a return. The return comes through the giving. It's in unconditional love. It's also the impact of the tools you bring to others. The fifth line is all about experience, wisdom, practicality, making things clear for people, making things available, simple. Your ability to simplify and make complex ideas accessible. You know, the impact of your many gifts in the fifth line, all coming out through your radiance. You know, think about your hologenetic profile if you're doing this journey, and think about all the gifts in there emerging through your radiance. Yeah, all coming through this. Wow, all those streams of energy coming out in one wave, one cloud. You know. The fifth line is the radiance of the leader, but it's not charisma. That's a different thing. Charisma is a different thing. Charisma can be ego. Radiance is humble. It's in the small. It's in the tone. It's in the love. You know, it doesn't play games. That's not a voice that plays games. The fifth line in its shadow plays games, but not the radiance. The radiance doesn't play games. It just speaks the sweetness and the warmth and the fire, and it lets that fire go where it goes, and it just that's its play. And then you come to the sixth line, and the sixth line is nurture. Radiance requires nurture. No, nurture, wonderful word. And in a way, it's the most important of all, because it brings conclusion, not that the 6 lines are more important than anyone else. But it's the most important message of the lines, because it grounds the radiance at the next level. You know, the 6th line is actually a grounding force. Even though it's at the top, it's grounding, but at the next level. It connects back to the first line, solitude. So it's about anchoring the angels in your aura. It's about drawing in those higher frequencies and anchoring them in your aura. You see, it's that next layer. And you do this work alone. But you're as far from being alone as you could possibly imagine. You cannot be alone in this cosmos. Not possible. Even if you think you're alone, you're never alone. There are hierarchies of beings of higher frequencies that surround us at all times, that are part of us, they're part of our higher evolution, because we don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. And in heightened states of consciousness, we can feel them and communicate with them. And they're always there. So the sixth line is about bringing the higher frequencies to earth. You have to nurture the subtle dimension inside you. You know, the sixth line requires a very delicate and refined environment. And that environment is no negativity, no negative thoughts, no negative words, no negative emotions. They've all got to be weeded out. I mean, I know that's a tall order, right? But for that radiance to really grow, it's true. Like you can have that radiance and you're really flying, and then one negative thought comes in or one victim pattern, it's just gone. Whiff, in a flash. I mean, you can grow it again, but that's how delicate our radiance is. That's how soft and subtle it is. So it's a process that gets refined over time and nurtured. All our gifts have to be refined, and our shadows have to be transmuted, and it takes time. It's about caring for your own soul. You know, we have this tendency to indulge in our shadows. We're self-indulgent. You know, we plummet into our own victimhood. You know, poor me, I've had such a bad day. Let me tell you about my bad day. No, your radiance isn't going to survive in that kind of environment. That needs to be transmuted internally. You know, radiance can't grow in those conditions. It requires subtlety, gentleness, tenderness, like a gardener holding this tender shoot, you know, soft green shoot. It needs inner space. It needs deep, deep patience. The sixth line is all about patience. It needs loving care. And this is how we have to learn then to treat ourselves and how to treat each other. That's the secret of radiance. Ultimately, it's about gratitude. You know, to be grateful for what we have. You know, to be grateful even for our suffering. To see that our suffering contains grace. To receive life graciously, with deep trust for every moment, for every experience that life brings us. All radiance needs to thrive is nurture. That's all it needs at a soul level. So if you're a sixth line, you're here to nurture that both inside yourself and for others. And if you're all, no matter what line you are, imbibe the wisdom of all these lines, because it's alive in all of them. You know, we all need that nurture at a soul level to thrive. And then radiance itself becomes the nurturing force, the power, because it nurtures us like a torus. It starts to emanate from us, and then it fuels back inside itself, and it starts to emanate, and it fuels back inside. And our contemplation deepens that process, because we're beginning to nurture ourselves, and then we can begin to nurture others. And then gently more and more love is released, and it starts to pour through us from the higher planes. It's quite a journey. So the contemplation of our radiance is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful place to come to in the Golden Path. You come to it quite early on, and you will keep returning to it. And you'll see that even at the highest stages of the gene keys, you know, there are layers and levels of very rarefied teachings contained in this transmission. And many of them will return to this point, this position of the sun, 88 degrees before we were born. That's how this radiance is calculated. It's our hidden sun sign. It's our true unrevealed nature. It's actually us after awakening. That's what it is. That's what your radiance is really describing. You after enlightenment, right? After awakening, after what I call the sixth initiation. This is what wants to work through you and come and play through you into the world, through your aura. So contemplate it gently and let it be in the background of all your contemplations, and really nurture this one. Give it a little bit of water each day. Let it grow quietly inside you. And one day, a little fire will grow and grow and grow, and it will become a forest fire. And it will jump from you to the others in your life and those around you. And you'll become an agent for change, for vast change, for awakened consciousness to explode through into the world. And that's a very precious thing. That is our highest purpose, all of us. You'll see that when we come to the purpose. This is what brings us stability. The contemplation of your radiance is what anchors you in stability. The breakthrough requires integration. The radiance, as it's released, requires time so that it can sink into the cells of the body. We can integrate it, assimilate it. It requires time to just sink in, because we're going to change internally through that radiance. And then another layer of breakthrough will open up for us. And we'll radiate more and more, and so it goes on, and so it goes on. So, be still and know thou art God. That is the secret of radiance. Be still and know. Be still and know thou art God. Because that is what the radiance is. That is what your radiance is pointing you towards. That divinity inside each of us.